I'm Ryan Miller.
And I'm Jessica Miller, and we are here to share God's amazing miracle in our lives.
Back in 2003, I was in almost a near fatal car accident where I should have been dead. I should have went to heaven, but I didn't die. Almost a year after that, I proposed to my wife now of 10 years, and we now have 5 beautiful kids.
So back in, what month was it?
November,
yes. My husband started having terrible, unexplained headaches for a week, constant. Medication didn't relieve them. We didn't know what was going on. And so finally, on Sunday after church, we said, we have to get this checked out. We have to find out what's going on. There's something wrong. So we went to the emergency room with him, and they gave him medicine for the pain, which was the first time in a week he had had any relief. And the emergency room doctor came in the room after they had done an MRI scan of his brain. And they showed us this black and white image, which I will never forget. And he told us that my husband had an inoperable brain tumor. And at that moment, my world came crashing down on me. We have 5 children, and I had my youngest, my 6-month-old, with us at the time. And I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. I started asking questions in my mind. Why God? Why Ryan? Why this family? You know, how was I going to tell my children that they weren't going to have their dad anymore? And it was a lot to bear. A lot to bear. I wanted to take the burden from him. He didn't deserve to go through this. I wanted to take it away from him, but I couldn't. We had to jump right into things. He had to be hospitalized, and they had planned a biopsy for 2 days later to find out what we were dealing with and what the plan was going to be, if there was going to be a possible treatment. They couldn't really tell us much other than we're going to find out what we're dealing with and go from there. So he was hospitalized, and those 2 days, I can say, were my darkest days. I spent a lot of time in prayer, finding comfort in the Lord in ways I had never had to. I just felt lost, and the Lord was with me, and He comforted me, and He prepared me. He kept me strong for Ryan, which was the most important thing that I had to do at the time, was be strong for him as his wife. So lots of prayer. Pastor Tim came and prayed with us, and that helped immensely. And we prepared for surgery. The morning of the brain biopsy, as his wife, I knew that it was my job, my responsibility to ensure that he was ready to be with the Lord. And so in that pre-op room, that quiet, small pre-op room, we sat together, and he repeated a prayer after me and rededicated his life to Jesus. And at that moment, I gave him back to Jesus. Wholly, fully, I said, Lord, he is yours. He is not mine. You gave him to me as a gift. I have enjoyed him. He is yours, and your will be done with him. And it was one of the hardest things that I had to do, but I had to let him go. Because God had him in his hands, and he had a plan that I couldn't understand. This was not a simple procedure. A brain biopsy is not simple. There were a lot of risks, and I didn't know if I was going to ever see him again. So I hugged him and I kissed him. And I made sure he knew that I loved him before they took him away. I had no choice. This was completely out of my control. There was nothing I could do to change what was happening in our lives. I had to give it to God and put my trust in Him. It was hard because I couldn't seek comfort that I would normally seek from my husband because he was in so much pain and partly unaware of what was happening because of the effect of the mass on his brain. I had to rely and find all of my comfort in Jesus. After about 2 hours, the neurosurgeon came out of the operating room and came to talk to us about what they had found. I was expecting him to tell me that my husband was dying and that they were going to do A and B to try to help him. I don't even remember how he said it. All I remember him saying is, "It was pus." And he said, "Your husband is going to be okay. This is treatable. It's not a tumor like we thought." And quite honestly, I was so set on those 2 days preparing my mind and my heart to hear the worst that it took me about 10-15 minutes just to soak that in. I didn't jump out of my chair right away and praise Jesus. I sat there in shock, because it was not what I was prepared for. But after those 10 minutes, once it soaked in, I was jumping out of my chair and praising the Lord, calling people and sharing the great news. Talk about a change of events and a roller coaster of emotions over a few days. He started antibiotics and was home within a few days. And then once he was home, his condition started getting worse. He started having trouble functioning, walking. He couldn't walk very well on his right side. He was having trouble talking. He couldn't type on a computer, which he had done, very well in the past. He couldn't sign his name. There were things happening, and I was very scared. I didn't know if he was sustaining permanent damage from this abscess in his brain, this infection. So we took him right away back to the neurosurgeon, and they repeated the MRI. And they found that the abscess, the infection, was much larger and deeper in his brain. And I'll never forget, the neurosurgeon told me, he said, people with these cases, people with these types of abscesses in the middle of their brain should be paralyzed. They're paralyzed. They're not able to walk. He had no medical explanation as to why my husband was still walking. And what a miracle, in itself for me to hear that. Another surgery was done to drain an ounce of fluid from the middle of his brain, which was putting pressure on all areas of his brain and affecting his functioning. And after the surgery, miraculously, he started to recover quite quickly, and his functions started coming back. And we didn't know if they were or not. We didn't know if he had sustained, permanent damage. That was the fear. But over time, he has sustained functioning again. And again, there is only one explanation, and that's God's touch. He had his final MRI, and the final MRI just showed a scar on his brain from where this infection was. But in my opinion, I don't see it as a scar. I see it as where my husband was touched by God. There are a couple things I just want to share. Some thoughts that I constantly came back to during this whole process that helped me. And the first one is God will never give us anything more than we can handle. Every day when I woke up, I thought, God, you're not going to give me more than I can handle, because you are God, and you are going to give me the strength to get through this, to support my husband and to support my family. You're going to do that. And that was so encouraging for me to know that thought and know that it wasn't ever going to get too hard for me. And the other verse that we all know that kept coming back to me, and I kept reciting it in my mind, is trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding of what's going on in your life. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. He will make your path straight. He will guide your life if you trust him. And I trust him more now, and in ways I never have before, after going through this. Jesus is the ultimate healer, and what he giveth, he can take away. And that is something we all need to remember. We need to be thankful for every day that we are given with our loved ones and our family, because it might be our last, and we may not know that till it's too late.